Hello, Advice.Tech Live. We are so happy to be here. My name is Meg Carpenter. I am the CEO and co-founder at FICOM Partners, and I am so honored to be joined by this amazing group of panelists that we have today. And what we're going to talk about is how the advisor can empower the consumer. So let me start by introducing our panelists. We are psyched to be here with Diana Yáñez. She is the CEO and founder at All the Colors, which expands access and financial planning to more people through group coaching. Also very happy to be here with Emily Binder, the founder of WealthVoice. Emily works with advisors across the country on all things voice marketing, podcasting, voice assistants, Alexa, sonic branding, which I feel like we need to hear more about. And then finally, Ross Riskin, who describes himself as a recovering CPA, who is the Chief Learning Officer at Investments and Wealth Institute, as well as the Chief Creative Officer at VisiWealth, which is an advice engagement tool for advisors. It creates visuals that you can use to help explain complicated solutions to your clients. So like I said, we are here today as a panel at Advice.Tech Live for you. We want to talk with you about why and how advisors can play a really important role in empowering consumers and how that can ultimately lead to really positive change in your business. So we've got a half an hour and so much to cover. Before we dive in with our panelists, we just wanted to set the stage a little bit and sort of contextualize for you how we're coming to this panel. So as a group, when we got together to prepare for Advice.Tech Live, we were talking about what does consumer empowerment mean to us? And we know that today at Advice.Tech Live, we're talking about how firms can empower the consumer. That was the panel you had earlier today. We're talking about advisors. And then later today, you're going to hear from another amazing panel who's going to talk about consumers. So we're thinking about it from the advisor perspective. And we really think that the idea of empowerment is really about giving the consumer the power to make the financial decisions that will give them clarity, certainty, and confidence. We think that it's really about educating and lifting up the consumer so that they believe that what they see and hear that they can actually do for themselves in their business. So we have Diana, who's going to be able to talk about serving and engaging underserved communities, as well as the power of coaching. We have Ross, who's going to be talking about education, among other things. And of course, Emily in alternative voice marketing. So we hope to be able to provide you all with some takeaways today that you can implement in your own business. And if you're a student that is joining us today from one of the CFP programs, across the country, we're so happy that you're here. Every single one of these panelists here would love to connect with you after Advice.Tech Live if you have any questions about what we cover today. But you're studying for a profession that is amazing, and we're so happy that you're here. So let's get started. I wanted to ask all three of you, why is it so important that financial advisors, financial planners are really intentional about how they're empowering the consumer? And Deanna, we'll start with you.
As a financial planner, when I used to work with high net worth individuals, clients would come to us and to solve a problem, right? They don't come because they just want to hear what we think about their investments or how they should do their finances, but they have a problem that they need help solving. When we really help clients understand the decisions they have to take and then have like an internal locus of control of how they're making those decisions, how they're going to implement it, then it's much easier on us as advisors to make sure that they implement the decision and the client actually gets the result they're looking for.
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about implementation as like crucial to empowerment. They need to be able to believe they can do it, and they need to actually be able to do it. Emily, what do you think? Why do you think it's so important for advisors to be intentional about how they're empowering consumers?
If you don't have a clear intention when you start doing anything, it won't be impactful. The thing about the intention is I look at the whole industry as very therapeutic or potentially therapeutic, and people are very adrenalized right now about money. I mean, sure, throughout history, there are times where you're more concerned about it based on the market, based on other factors, but it's especially timely with what's going on in the last few years. And it's a gift to be able to de-escalate that very internalized kind of PTSD, stressful state that a lot of people are in just collectively. Having the intention of being that guide or that kind of calming voice is really powerful because there are so few people who actually can provide that knowledgeably.
Yeah, being a guide, being a therapist, thinking beyond numbers, right? That's all absolutely important when we're thinking about providing a great value to consumers. Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, just to add on to those great comments, I think, when people feel empowered, they're able to engage in meaningful experiences. And I think that's what us as advisors, or just the advisor population, is really focused on, right? Or what are those experiences that we're helping build with clients? I think of three terms of, I think every client wants out of a relationship with an advisor are these experiences valuable? Are they understandable? And maybe most importantly, to create stickiness, are they actually enjoyable? Are they experiences where someone wants to go and actually talk with their advisor and ask questions, and they aren't afraid of the answers because they know they're being heard, they're being understood, but the concepts are being explained to them in a way that they actually understand and can actually have buy-in. That's my educator kind of angle to it that I'll talk about a little bit later. But it's all about those meaningful experiences that you can create as an advisor.
I think that's right. And I think what you said too about allowing the consumer to feel seen and feel heard and feel as though they can sort of see themselves in the outcome. I know as an industry, we are all very, very committed to increasing as an industry our diversity and ability to be an inclusive place where people feel as though they can belong. And I think that this concept that we're talking about today, we're talking about advisors and empowering the consumer, is so crucial to get to that diversity. Because if you are able to demonstrate to a specific type of client, I see you, I understand you, I hear you, and I'm here to help you, someone who looks like you, someone who sounds like you, someone who maybe has similar experiences, that's where we can really provide the most value in this industry. And it goes far beyond just serving people that have lots of zeros in their net worth. Like really helping everyone is how we can help ourselves, how we can elevate each other and really lift the community up. So thank you all for sharing that. And I know that we really want to spend most of the time today giving specific examples. So for the advisors that are tuning in to Advice.Tech Live today, as well as all of the tech platforms who are demoing and helping us figure out how tech can help consumer empowerment, we want to be able to share examples from what the three of you are doing in your fields with your businesses. And so I'd love to just go around the horn and hear examples. So specifically, like either as an advisor, because I know Ross and Deanna, you've spent time as advisors, or with the advisors that you serve. I know, Emily, you serve many, many advisors and firms across the country. What are you seeing? What are the cool, practical examples that you're seeing across the industry? Anyone want to start?
I'll start. So for myself, I have the technical background as a CFP, but also I went through and I got the registered life planning designation through Kinder. And that really is what empowered me to call myself now a coach. One of my favorite success stories that I have with a client was we had been working on her spending, right? So because I work with people who are not what we traditionally serve in financial industries, often spending and cash flow is where we spend a lot of time, which is where it can be really sticky, right? We all know like there's decisions that are being made daily, multiple times a day, and are they going to take, and whether those decisions are in the client's best interest or not, like those. So in this conversation, she started to kind of beat herself up over like, I shouldn't have done this. And then there was that emergency and I knew it was coming. And just, I could see she was kind of spiraling. And because we'd had, this must've been like our second or third session, I paused, I stopped and I said, you're not overspending. You're actually under earning. And when I pointed that out to her, she already knew. She knew that she was under earning because she had multiple business lines or multiple things that she was juggling. And there was only one out of her four revenue streams that was actually paying her a livable wage. So you can imagine what that was like. And she really respected that it was coming from me, like a person who's an expert in the industry, but also the fact that I already had spent time getting to know her goals and where she was, right? So that's where when we put on that coaching hat of like listening to the client, being able to, and I didn't have to give her solutions on how she was going to earn more. Just by pointing that out and creating space for her to come back to it and work on it on her own, she decided to like go back to school and get a graduate degree and like really decide what would work for her long term, right? So that's really like empowering the client, inviting her to own her power in that area and focus on how does she make more money? How does she move towards a livable wage?
Will you share that designation with the audience one more time in case anyone didn't catch it?
Yeah, so RLP stands for Registered Life Planner, and it's through the Kinder Institute.
Okay, because I think that coaching is a skill, right? It's not necessarily easy to be a coach. It's a skill that has to be practiced. It takes a high level of empathy and EQ, but also the ability and knowledge to ask the right questions. Really, I think with like no predetermined answer or destination that you're trying to take the client to. So any advice that you would give to advisor, like maybe they'll go out and register and take this class at the Kinder Institute because of hearing you, but like if they're thinking to themselves, like, I don't really know like how to ask the right questions, like is there a specific set of questions that, or like one question that you find to be the most powerful when you're coaching consumers that you could share some ideas with the audience?
Yeah, I think actually pausing. Right. So asking the question that you ask and then pausing and being okay with the client, with the consumer being uncomfortable. Because they aren't, like Emily said earlier, like it's hard to have these conversations. They tend to be very therapeutic. So when someone comes to you and is opening up the door to money conversations, you can just ask a question and then pause. They'll come up like if I had told her go back to school and get a grad degree, like that would have been out of left field. It would have made no sense. But with the pause and her deciding on her own, then it was actually her like internal decision, right? So just pause more, listen more.
One of the greatest attributes of leadership is how well of a listener you can be when people need to share. Emily, what about you? I know you work with advisors as well as larger advisory firms across the country. Can you share some examples with us that you've seen? Like, what are these firms and advisors doing that are really helping to empower the consumer?
I have a lot of great examples. I thought about this, and there are 3 that I'd highlight. So, and they're very different. So, as you mentioned, larger firms. So, Plan Corp, they manage, I think, 4 or 5 billion. And they've been around for decades. They're doing a really good job because it's multimodal, all the content they put out, and even the way that they do client communication. So whether it's these are posts, maybe prospects will see them, or this is something that's really for clients to add value. They're doing it on voice, they're doing it on, there's email, there's blogging, there's in person. So they're hitting all of those modalities. And of course, people have different learning styles, auditory, visual, kinesthetic. I don't know how they're doing kinesthetic, but they've really got the auditory, the visual, reading, text covered. And Peter Lazaroff, he has the Long-Term Investor podcast, which is awesome. They've got a WealthVoice where they're updating people hands-free, which is also accessibility, right? And any age group can use it, but especially for people that aren't necessarily digital native, maybe they're older, they don't want to mess with this. Like it's not very natural. So you could get Plan Corp's updates on Alexa. That's cool. And they've really embraced the idea of we just want to be wherever people prefer to get the information or the updates. It's not about where we think we should be. We'll be everywhere. So I love that. Another example, and this one's a little more creative and different. So you guys know Justin Costelli. He is an advisor, but he has launched a brand that's tertiary. It is involved with his RIA, but it's called Life's Pursuit, PRST. And it's based in stoicism and finding your purpose and following your passion. And it's not where he's trying to sell anything. It's really more of a content-driven, almost spiritual. It's really neat. And he launched a WealthVoice for that. And he has a podcast. It's Life's Pursuit, PRST. And you can get it on Spotify. You can get it on Voice. He has a blog. He has the content on social. And there's videos. So it's, again, the multimodal. But it's very, like we talked about at the beginning, what's the intention? It's purpose-driven. And you can really see that shine through. And it's so compelling. And I think if you start with that, the money comes, the business purpose, it will come. The last example, someone I think is doing a fantastic job at empowering people is my friend Brittany Castro. You may have seen her videos on TikTok. So she is a CFP. She's been an advisor, and now she's really doubled down on just creating super accessible content. So especially helpful for younger people because it's in that format of bite-sized, friendly, realistic. Like, how do you split the tab at dinner? What's the Venmo etiquette? So that's great. And she's taking advantage of that really hot social app, which is TikTok. So yeah, those are all things that came to mind for me.
So many good nuggets in there. I mean, you're talking about intentionality and purpose, which is so critical. You're talking about accessibility. I think one of the things that you mentioned at the top when you're talking about that first example is being available on all the channels, like wherever anybody wants to consume content, being available. But I also heard you sort of share an example, Emily, where it's not about more, right? It's not about more content, but it's about thinking about how you use that content, different modalities, different channels, so that you can be where your consumers are when they're ready to consume that content.
And
Really
it's so easy nowadays to just repurpose. Like you could shoot one video and clip audio from it, make a TikTok out of it, hire somebody that's good at editing those things and just sit down and block a day. I'm going to make some content today and talk about what I think is going to be helpful to people. You don't have to spend as much time as you used to get more mileage out of one piece of content.
Right. Repurpose and repackage. I always say, because we talk a lot about the power of podcasting for advisors, and we've seen such tremendous advisor podcasts out there. We host the FICOM Investment News Advisor Podcast Awards every year. So we see like these amazing advisors who are really creating change and empowering consumers through podcasts. And I always say like podcasts are just a Trojan horse for content. So for me as an executive and a CEO and business owner and a mom of 3 little kids, like I can commit my time to recording 2 podcast episodes a month. And then my team can repurpose and repackage that and squeeze all the juice out of it. But I don't necessarily have to create dozens and dozens of pieces of content. I can just create those 2. So it's a really, really good reminder, because this can feel overwhelming, right? When we're talking about empowering consumers, and maybe that's not something that planners and advisors have really considered as they're building out their business plan. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. That's why it's so awesome that the 3 of you are here to share these examples, because I think you're doing it in really efficient and scalable ways. So Ross, we've sort of talked about coaching. We've talked about auditory. You know, you're an educator and you have a tool that's for visual learners. So give us some examples that you've seen of what advisors are doing to empower consumers in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say I love the comments made by Emily there about, you know, recognizing that people have different learning styles and preferences really to learning, and then really just meeting them where they're at, right? Like going to the platforms they're already on, where they're consuming content is so important. You know, I was thinking about that question and thinking about this beforehand. And, you know, I think if I think about what's the one thing that everyone on this panel and everyone attending has had, still remembers, and may never forget, and that's a great teacher. I think we all have that one person we remember, whether it was high school, middle school, college, whatever. And we remember them because they created a moment where we were empowered to actually learn, engage with the topic, maybe think about things differently, shift our mindset. And look, I've been very fortunate that I've been able to, I've made it a point to be able to work as both an advisor and an educator with a wide variety of people. I mean, years ago, I helped build a CFP program at a very small private liberal arts college in Connecticut that traditionally serves underserved populations and high population of first-generation college students. I've been fortunate to go speak at conferences on very technical, advanced topics, and everywhere in between, every income, net worth level, intellect level in between. The same thing always came out of those conversations, those seminars, those meetings with people, is that people need information simplified for them. And I found that using visuals was a great way to do that. That'd be, you know, from drawing stuff on whiteboards, which we know isn't scalable, to actually creating high-end graphics, which that's what I'm more involved with now, but just trying to put things like that in front of people. And I think where we've seen that in the industry is there is way more of that on the consumer end for maybe not simpler things, but things that maybe aren't that complicated to begin with. Therefore, making a visual of something that's not that complicated really isn't that challenging. But we're doing visuals of like grats and slats and complicated trust things, because every time I see those things presented, it's a PowerPoint slide with a bunch of bullet points or text. And we have not developed as human beings to process text the way we can visuals or even audio that way. So that's kind of my main thing is, if you're an advisor and you really can take that approach of an educator or of a teacher and really focus on the transfer of knowledge, you're able to embed yourself, your presence, those experiences you create in your client's memory. I mean, think about that. Not only are you helping people make better financial decisions, live better financial lives, but you're embedding yourself. You are memorable like that teacher they had. So that's super powerful. And I think everybody should be striving to do that, or really know your client. I mean, the best teachers, if you think about it and take a step back and look at a classroom, you have a couple students on this side that are super advanced and you need to provide kind of extended learning opportunities for them because they're going to go off on their own, make sure they're still challenged. Then you have people on this side that you need to handhold. And then a lot of people are in the middle there for which things like visuals or other things that have been tested and we know work, that you could argue are scalable, can actually be used for the majority of your clients. But you could do that same exercise with your client list of understanding who your clients are, how they learn best, different learning preferences moving forward.
And all of these examples are really why advisors do have such a tremendous opportunity to create change, for people who really need it. So we're talking about advisors as coaches, advisors as therapists, advisors as educators and teachers. And if you think about the power, I mean, how awesome. But Ross, break it down for the listener. They're thinking, okay, visual, like how do you do that? Like, if you're speaking to a client on a Zoom session like this, like, what does it look like to be like, I'm going to show you?
I think it really depends on the subject being covered. I think this is one of those cases where less is more. I think we're at two ends of the spectrum with content we have as advisors that we deliver. Of multimodal is absolutely important because we know, if we know our clients, we know certain things are going to hit better with them. But most people don't want to sit through a 30 or 40 slide PowerPoint presentation. We've lost them. They're not interested, but more importantly, they're cognitively overloaded. And so, I try to cover maybe one or two visuals of concepts of things I'm actually bringing up, because that's the beauty of a visual, unlike an article or even a video sometimes, is those things have very clear start points and end points. And visuals don't. So some visuals, maybe you take 5 minutes to go through with a client and they get it. Others, maybe you spend an hour on it because it brings out some other conversations that evolve from it. But at the end of the day, you could have had an hour-long meeting with a client and you went over one visual. And then think about if you did that even on a monthly basis, even if you had a popular planning strategy that came up, or something that applied to everybody. Like I talked to an advisor group that used this with Irma when they had clients calling up and saying, hey, Social Security benefits went up, but why is my check less? Well, because the Medicare Part B premium went up. And so instead of having 50 individual 20-minute phone calls explaining that, they got their clients together that it applied to in one 30-minute webinar where they went over a visual and explained that to them. So there's opportunities to protect your time while also getting the client to a sufficient level of understanding without overloading them cognitively. I mean, these topics are already scary enough for people to deal with. And as was mentioned before, I think one of the other panels of the kind of the financial jargon is we need to do our best job possible removing those barriers and those concerns for people.
Yeah.
So they want to engage with us.
Other than the medical industry, and I'm not an advisor, as you guys know, I would say that the financial industry, the idea of markets and money in general, is one of the most esoteric, and it feels unfriendly to the uninitiated. So there's a major opportunity to break it down. And you can see a lot of popular content does this, where they're like, what is inflation? What does that actually mean exactly? And like on TikTok or wherever, just bottom line it and put it into plain English. I think there's a bit of a fiefdom, and this happens in all kinds of it's in marketing too, where it's like, we don't want people to fully understand this because then they might not need us. But that's not the way it works. Also, you could just drop like a Carl Richards cartoon into your deck. Just make it fun, like something that's easy to understand. It doesn't have to all be charts. And I'm not a visual expert by any means here, but as somebody who, if I were looking at a deck, I'd like to see something different, like pop here. Maybe it's a cartoon or an audiogram, right? The multimodal.
Yes, and I think that's what WealthVoice does, right? And hello.
Yeah, I'll just add one other comment on that. And yeah, my cat ran in here.
I love it.
I think the term we've been using is we are creating advisor-driven, client-focused visuals. So they're not the typical infographic, which a lot are primarily consumer-driven, where you send to a client and they can kind of figure it out on their own. But the reality is there just are topics where the advisor needs to be involved. You need to add your value. It kind of go back to the PowerPoint, right? I mean, the best PowerPoints, the best presentations don't have paragraphs of text that explain everything. If that were the case, why would you even show up and listen to anybody? So I think that focus of, hey, here's something that's visually pleasing. I can follow it, but I still need to speak with someone that can really walk me through this and provide that educational moment for me.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. We're going to have to wrap up here soon, and we do want to make sure that we are able to share key takeaways with the audience, but maybe one or two more questions before that. Emily, you talked a lot. You mentioned TikTok a few times. And so is it your belief that consumers have to be digital natives in order to benefit from what we're talking about today?
No, everybody has a phone, and that's all you need. You don't have to be a millennial or a Gen Z. Like who do we consider a digital native, right? Someone that grew up with this technology? No. And the technology's become easier to use, more accessible. This is one of the things that I think is so powerful about voice activated technology is that the screen's gone. It's there and there are graphics and you can have that optionally, but just to have that experience that's ambient and that's more natural. Like, I think that's huge, and keep an eye on that for the next few years. They don't have to be digital natives, but be multimodal, be in different places because people learn differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deanna, another question for you is, what do you think, can you break it down for us? Like, what's the benefit to advisors to empower consumers?
Like I mentioned earlier, the benefit is really that the consumers will come up with their own innovative solutions, right, to whatever the problem is in some aspects. And it'll make implementation easier. It'll be less handholding on our end. And one of the things when Ross was talking about visuals, I also thought of the power of storytelling, right? When you are using a visual and you add a story to it, it makes it easier for the client to remember it. It makes it easier for the clients to put themselves in that position.
Thank you. So I'd love for each of you to share just one actionable takeaway so that the advisors and planners and students that are listening to this can think, what is the one thing that I can do today based on what we've just discussed? So Ross, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my main takeaway is try to use visuals, try to incorporate them. I don't care whether you go and you find high quality graphics or check out VisuWealth, or you want to write stuff on whiteboards. That's fine. But try it out and see what the response is to that, especially if you've never done it before. That would be my big takeaway. And then when you're doing that, take notes of that. Like, hey, what was their reaction when I actually presented it this way? And then you can actually track whether it's successful or not, rather than kind of doing everything one-off, and then you don't really have anything to measure against. So I would say try to introduce visuals and see how it goes with your clients.
Get started, listen and learn. Yeah. Emily, what about you?
I was thinking about this question from the vantage point of intention. And, New Year's, we always make resolutions, but why? It's September. Make your resolutions now. What do you want to happen in the next year? And do word illusions, not resolutions. So 3 keywords, power words, like helpful, accessible, empowering. What is important to you? And then look at your marketing calendar, look at your marketing budget. What tools do I need? What can I get rid of? What do I want to try next year so that I can set myself up to make those things happen? You could do voice. You could do WealthVoice. You could do a podcast. Maybe you want to get better with your graphics and visuals. Hire somebody to fix your deck, whatever it is. But just be really intentional with, like, these are the word illusions that I want to make happen and how I'm going to empower people that way.
Love that. Deanna, what about you? What's the one actionable takeaway?
Well, Ross and Emily have done a great job about talking about tools, the delivery of advice. I really want people to also remember to listen, right? I mean, it's not a tool, but it's like once you deliver all this advice, how do you make sure that clients implement it? So pausing, really figuring out that you're answering their problem, not the problem that you're thinking of. One great resource that I wanted to mention was Advice That Sticks by Moira Summers. It's a great book about how to deliver advice and how to understand where the client's at when you're delivering it.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I hope that everyone who's listening was able to take some takeaways about how you as an advisor can really empower consumers. We believe that knowledge transfer is power. We think that old school advisors think they have to guard the knowledge, but new school advisors know that knowledge actually drives engagement. It helps to increase retention, and it moves your business from transactional to ongoing relationships. So the benefit is, of course, to the consumer, but also to the advisor. Thank you to the Asset Map team for your hustle and heart and bringing Advice.Tech Live to us every year. Deanna, Ross, Emily, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Advice.Tech Live.